said, I'm Nabil. I'm a senior political science major from San Francisco, and I'm going to be the moderator tonight. So we're just going to go ahead and start with introductions for our panelists. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask each of you individually to introduce yourself, and we'll start with Scott.
Hey everyone, my name is Scott Matthews. I'm class of 2009. Like Nabil, I was a political science major at Davidson. After I left, I went to South Carolina Law School, just down the road in Columbia, and currently work as an assistant attorney general at the Attorney General's office in criminal appeals. Prior to that, I was a prosecutor in both North Carolina and South Carolina. And since 2018, I've also been a part-time preacher with a small Methodist church in Blythewood. So I have two careers now, so I can provide some perspective on both of those.
Awesome, thank you. Can we Angelina next?
Sure, thank you so much. I'm also class of 2009 with Scott. Angelina Darasaw, and I was a political science major as well. After Davidson, I went ahead and went straight to grad school to Wake Forest, had a career in digital business development at ESPN, then Viacom. And for the last 6 years, I've run my own business. My business is C-Suite Coach, and we offer 3 key services. Coach staffing. So we vet coaches, train them, and manage them for coaching programs for large companies. We also do other program management services, and we create content for professional development. So that's what I've been up to since Davidson.
Awesome, thank you. And then last but not least, Anna Drake.
Hey, I'm Anna Drake Borsha, class of 2008, and I was a religion major at Davidson. After Davidson, I stayed in Charlotte and worked at the YWCA Central Carolinas doing youth programming, and then went on into development at Queen's University of Charlotte and ended up pursuing higher education, doing my PhD in higher education policy at UT Austin, Texas. And since then, I've been working in higher ed and university settings and currently work at the University Innovation Alliance. So I work with a bunch of of public research universities to help them scale strategies around improving outcomes for low-income students.
Awesome, thank you. So those are all our panelists, and I think with that, we can jump straight into the questions. So the first question is, how do you see the challenges of the 2008-2009 job market as similar to or different from this crisis? And I'll pass that question to Anna Drake first.
I knew when I was asked to be on this, I was going to get an 08 question. Well, I mean, I think the biggest difference is that it's a lot worse, unfortunately, for you all. You know, the unemployment has been a lot higher. There've been a lot more jobs lost. The response in general is due to something very different than what it was in 2008, much more, I think, comprehensive and systematic in terms of how it relates to the healthcare system. But I think the biggest difference for me is how I keep wanting to say universities, but how companies and employers are differently equipped to support virtual work in a way that's much more flexible and adaptable than it was when I was graduating, for sure. And so even I primarily work in the nonprofit and university space, even those entities are much more capable than they were before of being more flexible with what work looks like. And that's something that, you know, we were all trying to figure out what we were going to do in 2008. We were much more limited in what it looked like. So I think that that's an opportunity and an asset in the current situation. And also, because of COVID, employers have adapted even further to leverage, you know, the technology resources and infrastructure they already had to make it possible for people to work in different kinds of ways. Hopefully that means there's more creativity and different kinds of opportunities than we had available to us in a way.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question is for Angelina, and this question is, from your recollection, what were you and your classmates most concerned about with regards to the job search as you approach graduation? How did you stay positive and motivated throughout your search process?
Yeah, so at that stage in our lives, when I look back to getting ready to graduate, there were just a lot of concerns about how do I pick the right thing to do next? And how do I find something that I'm really going to love and enjoy, especially with the potential of less options in our era? And I don't know if it's the same for current students, but finance was huge for folks coming out of Davidson. And for those of us that didn't want to go down that path, there were a lot of concerns around, well, what is the right path? And will it be one with a liberal arts degree that will get me to any money? So I think what made me stay positive, thankfully, I had a great network from internship experiences and was able to trial out different kinds of positions and companies that were not really the traditional route that I saw often coming from Davidson. So I felt like having that exposure gave me access to seeing what I really did want for myself, and that alleviated a lot of the stress. I also went ahead, like Scott, I went straight to school afterwards as well. So having some additional time to really get focused, get more education gave me a little bit of runway when it came to trying to figure out what I really wanted my next step to be.
Thank you. So the next question is for Scott. And this one is for students starting grad school in the fall who both want and need to work part-time, but feel like lots of places aren't going to be hiring for part-time positions. Do you have any advice for navigating that?
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, it's probably not the answer you want to hear, but in my experience, means you probably need to get two jobs. The first job is in whatever field you want to go in, which would usually be, in my experience, was an unpaid internship. I interned at the Davidson County District Attorney's Office, which of course is not, Davidson is not in Davidson County, as y'all know. It's a little further up the road in Lexington, but I did that also having a second job to make ends meet. And I was really lucky at my law school. They had a organization called the Public Interest Loan Society, where during the summers while I was in school, I was able to get a grant to pay my living expenses so I could have this free job that I didn't, or that didn't pay me. But I had to do other work in law school. Like, for instance, I worked for the school itself in the development office. Now, I had no interest in doing development whatsoever, but it was a paying job, so I took it. So I'd say you can't really be too selective. With what you do is you're actually get paid job. You can find all kinds of, work in a restaurant or wherever to make ends meet, or if you can make it work through student loans, that's also, that's mainly how I've survived in law school. So it's a discouraging answer, and I wish I could give a more encouraging one, but you kind of have to, most, at least in my field and in the legal field, public interest jobs, which is what I was interested in, working as a prosecutor or a public defender, those don't pay for internships. So you have to get that job to get the experience, but you might also have to have another job to pay your bills. Now, hopefully you can find both. A bunch of my classmates worked at law firms and they did get paid pretty well. So it's, hopefully you can find that nice medium and get both experience in whatever field you're going in and to be paid well. But that would be my advice, to offer to work for free for whatever organization or office you're trying to break into, and that can get your foot in the door. And that turned out to be very helpful for me, because I got my foot in the door in that first job, which the district attorney was a Davidson grad. So I think that's how I got the job. And then that gave me the experience I needed to get my first job later on.
Great, thank you. So now we're moving into questions that are open. Anybody can answer. I'll just pick somebody who raises their hand first. So this first question is, can you talk about successful networking experience you've had in your professional development?
I can kick that one off. So one of the things I've found to be most helpful is when you're doing blind networking, and I use LinkedIn quite a lot. So how I started my job search process is I thought about all of the brands and companies that I actually liked. Was I in love with their content, with their products, what they put out? Did I think it would be a fun working environment? How familiar was I with the brand? And I basically create anything that seemed exciting to me. And I basically created a spreadsheet and laid all those companies out. Then I went on LinkedIn, put all of those companies' names in, and tried to see any sort of connection I could find. So I definitely leveraged the Davidson network a lot. Used that as much as possible. If we had one connection in common, tried to ask the connection for an introduction. And especially if they went to Davidson or Wake Forest, it was easy to reach out to them. But then I started going broad. There were some companies I was interested in, and I didn't know anyone at all who was there. So I would see, okay, that person went to North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Hey, in my intro email, I see that we both went to schools in North Carolina. I'm actually from Brooklyn, New York. It was amazing for me to spend some time outside of Brooklyn. I'm really interested in knowing more about your role at Google. Can you please, would you be willing to have 15 minutes to connect with me about it? So I used that a lot, trying to find ways where you're connected, whether it's through a school affiliation, a sorority, a fraternity, whatever the case might be, to open up a conversation was really probably the most successful thing that I did when it came to networking. And I would say in those initial conversations, often there wasn't a job that I had in mind, but it was me gathering information to learn more about the company. And I would keep notes on all that in my spreadsheet. So that way, when I did get to the stage where I found a job that I liked, I, actually had content for the cover letter and for those initial interviews because I kept notes on who I spoke with and what they told me about their role.
I'll jump in because Angelina switched something that I was going to mention. I really liked the 15 minutes and also the real clarity when you reached out to say, I would like to know X. I think that, well, first, my first two jobs out of Davidson both came from Davidson connections. And so I just think that it's rare that an alum, I hope an alum would never say that they won't talk to you no matter what you say, but I think you'll be so really leverage that. But I think you'll be most successful if you're very clear in what you're asking when you reach out. And if you ask for a very short chunk of time, that could turn into a great relationship and then you talk more and that's wonderful. But if you under ask and are very specific, you're much more likely to get a yes, and you're much more likely to impress that person than you would be if you were kind of, can I pick your brain? I just so let can we connect? I think it's very helpful when they know exactly how they can add value for you. And then they're more likely to feel like they can do that. So I'd say ask for short time, be very specific about what you want, even if it's not like, a very complex question. I think it's great to say, I'd love to know more about your role, like how you got into this role. That way they're like, it's spend 15 minutes talking about that. And it's pretty much a no-brainer for them and you can go forward from there.
Yeah, I missed the first part of Angelina's answer. I had to go put my daughter to bed, so I apologize for that.
Your daughter goes to bed a lot faster than my daughter.
Well, she was getting to that point. I could tell she was about to fall asleep. I would really, really focus on the Davidson alum connections that you know of. I mentioned before in my previous answer that the first job I got in law school was from a Davidson alum, the district attorney in Davidson County. I think he still is the district attorney there if anybody's looking at looking at pursuing a job in the legal field. But also after I graduated law school, I reached out to another Davidson alum who was also a USC alum. So I had that double connection with him. And similar to what Anna said, I reached out to him and said, hey, can we meet together for a short period of time? Or I think I said, let's have lunch or something. And he was very receptive. And I didn't get a job with him, but he pointed me in a lot of good directions. And I think I think I got his contact info by contacting the Davidson Career Services office, and they said this guy, lives in Columbia, works in Columbia, and I think Angelina referred to this, or maybe it was Anna. I hope that all of us feel a bond having gone to Davidson, where you would, I don't know of any Davidson grads that would just say, get lost, I don't want anything to do with you. So I think they're all going to talk to you for a minute, and they may or may not be able to help you, but if they can't help you, they might point you in the right direction of somebody who can.
Well, any last comments before we move on? Awesome. So the next question is, can you offer advice on how to successfully network? For example, what resources did you use and how did you approach people you want? That's pretty similar to the last question. Should I skip that one, Kelly? Cool. Okay. The next question is, how can I best become a competitive candidate and make sure my application is noticed when I'm applying through career portals? Anybody can take that one.
Well, I would say it goes back to the networking piece. The best way you can be a competitive candidate is to use the network. Actually, in my career, there were times where I applied on career portals and got rejected. And then because of my network, at my job at Viacom, for instance, I was able to connect with someone who worked there, someone who was in my circle. And she raised my application back up, or like bumped it back up to the hiring manager. And even though I had been rejected from the general pool, I then got an email that said from the actual hiring manager, so-and-so referred you, thank you so much. Instead of that generic, like, do not reply, we're not interested in your application, and moved on. But then I was able to respond back and say, so I've done the job. Here's exactly what I've already done that matches what you put in the job description. I really think you should interview me. That email got me an interview, which led me to the job, which gave me almost 40K more than what I was making in my previous role. So using your network is, I wouldn't rely strictly on career portals at all. That network piece is really important when it comes to making sure your application is seen and reviewed.
I would say you should emphasize, as Angelina referred to, your experience and whatever job, or, if you don't have any experience, certainly say that you're very interested in that career or that job. But the way I feel like after I graduated, when so this is 3 years later, after Davidson. So I did get that time for the economy to get better and hide out in grad school, so to speak. But I got my first real job by really emphasizing my experience that I gained in law school, working at this Davidson County office. And North Carolina has a rule where you can try jury trials when you're in law school. So I, more so than my classmates in South Carolina, I had that leg up on them just because I had very specific experience for that field. So I emphasize that. But I would also don't be too picky about where you apply and what cities you apply in. The first real job I got was in Robeson County, Lumberton. If any of y'all know where that is. Nobody wants to live in Lumberton. I didn't want to live in Lumberton, but I applied there anyway because I thought I got a better chance of getting a job there. And to illustrate that, we had a conference at UNC for district attorneys, and the district attorney from Wilmington, also known as a place everybody wants to live in, at the beach, said that they had 600 applications for one opening in Wilmington. So I don't think 1 in 600 is very good odds. So I don't know how many people applied for my job in Lumberton, but it was a lot less than 600. So be willing, think outside the box, and you don't have to live there forever, but you can get some good experience and then move to Charlotte or Durham or wherever else you want to go.
Yeah, second both what Scott and Angelina shared. I think that's great. I would also say it's super basic, but um, submit all the materials that are asked, and including anything supplemental, because I can't tell you how many times I've reviewed a bajillion applicants for a posting that really amounts to a very small group of applicants who submitted everything that was required and who had strong cover letters and who met all of the qualifications. So it's easy. I mean, the job portals and kind of the depersonal application process is not ideal, and the network is going to be the way to go. But if there's something that you're excited about, still apply, because you never know who else is applying. It could be a bajillion people, but maybe you're really competing against 20 of them. So give it a shot. Because if you're missing stuff, you'll get cut out. But if you rise to the cream of the crop really quickly, then you do have a shot.
Awesome. Any last comments before we move on? So the next question is there any way to leverage the fact that my job interviews are conducted via Zoom as opposed to in person? Alternatively, what do I need to do to make a good impression through a video call that's different than what I would do at an in-person interview?
One thing I think that's great about the virtual setting right now is folks are a lot more comfortable. As you can see, I am now at the stage of the pandemic where you're lucky if I have my camera on, but I wear sweatshirts, or I'm in home, right? So I'm going to be comfortable when I'm doing those things. And I think the other piece of it is everyone is human, and this is a time to show up with empathy. You definitely don't want to get too personal in an interview, but asking people or opening up conversations and asking them about ways in which they've managed in the pandemic can lead to really interesting ways to get to know people. I actually just had a pitch recently with the chief people officer of a Fortune 100 company, and what really got us off on a good footing was he was chatting about how he had he's from another country, and he had a quarantine in the other country to visit his family back home, and what that experience was like. He had to live he had to stay in a hotel room that was like 600 square feet for 2 weeks and couldn't leave the room. So how he stayed active, and we got into a really great discussion about it. And then we're able to chat business in a really powerful way because we had that initial first connection. So I think leveraging the fact that one, people are at home, they're a little more comfortable, there's that craving of social time is really important. And then the other piece of it is now you have a lot more time, right? Some of the chaos for me when I was in the interview stage was living in New York City, a train could be late, or you didn't know what the security was going to be like in the building. And all of those things kind of can put you off when you're trying to be confident in a situation that might drive anxiety. So now you're at home. When you have a Zoom link, maybe to get the interview started, you can come up with your own routine of what makes you feel confident, and you're gaining time. You don't have that time to travel back and forth. So what I do if I'm having a pitch, for instance, is I'll have a Google Doc up in the other tab, right? Instead of having to look down at notes or have all of that show up, and whatever I've researched about the person or points I want to make, questions I want to ask, I can have right there with me, be looking at the person and show up very, very prepared. So these are some of the things that can be used to our advantage. I can also, if they mention something and I haven't heard of it, go right to Google on my laptop and make sure that I, am pulling that up and researching it right away. So I think those are some of the unique advantages that we have to this virtual setting. One thing that I would say is make sure all your notifications are off on your computer so you're not being distracting, and that you found a background and an environment that doesn't show up as distracting as well.
I would say use it to your advantage in that you young folk are already really savvy with technology in a way that clearly we've all gotten to a weird stage of, being at home and on camera all the time. So we've adapted if that wasn't something that we were super savvy with, but show that you're comfortable on Zoom. That's going to be a huge part of work now, even after the pandemic, because so many organizations have had to expand the ways in which they use technology. Probably more jobs will not necessarily go back to being in person because it allows them to recruit candidates from diverse locations and backgrounds that aren't then bound by place. So show that you're comfortable in that space. And I think that that will bode well for your ability to excel in a more flexible work environment. And then also, Angelina mentioned just, I mean, obviously people are in all sorts of different environments. And so it's totally fine if you don't have, you know, a gorgeous backdrop, but definitely close your closet doors and make up your bed. And, you know, if possible, use a virtual background, like just look like you tried and that you noticed, you know, and take it seriously, because I've seen some weird things on Zoom, you know, there's that people sort of, you know, forget or don't care. So, you know, just make a little effort and I think people will notice.
I don't really have much to add. I feel like Anna gave great advice there. I actually like her background. She looks like she's got a degree hanging on the wall. Maybe you could put your Davidson degree up there. You know, it's in Latin, so you can't read it, but people would know you know, it looks professional. And you can wear sweatpants, but probably not for an interview. I mean, I feel like that if you might set yourself apart if you wore a suit, you know, even if you're sitting in your bedroom and it feels kind of weird, that'd probably be better than wearing sweatpants. But I just, I don't have anything else to add. Haven't had to deal with that yet, but, and, you know, I guess you could say, don't feel like it's awkward because it's awkward for everybody. So you're not at any disadvantage because, you know, everybody else that's interviewing has to go through it, and the interviewer himself has to deal with the awkwardness of Zoom. So, you know, you could even poke fun at yourself at it and say like, oh, you know, I think it's good if you are technologically sufficient, but if you can't figure everything out, I think it's okay to, you know, make a joke about it and don't take it too seriously.
Cool. So the next question is, what are your suggestions for conducting a job search rooted in a particular city?
I'll start with that. Don't root it in a particular city. I said that earlier about Lumberton. That's just repeat everything I just said. Like it's hard to get a job in places like Charlotte, you know, Winston-Salem, Columbia, because people want to live in those cities. And I think you're increasing your chances to get a job if you are willing to think outside the box. When I moved to South Carolina, you know, I did move to Columbia, but I got a job in Sumter. There aren't many people that want to live in Sumter either. And I commuted back and forth from Columbia to Sumter, and that was a pain for 3 years. But I knew eventually, you know, after I get my foot in the door in this field, in this state, I can find a job in Columbia. And I did 3 years later. But I think it's, if you do, you know, have to focus on one city like Charlotte, you know, maybe be willing to go out to Belmont or you know, Mooresville, trying to think of just towns around Charlotte, Rock Hill, York, you know, look in areas that you could commute to from Charlotte, you know, so I think that increases your chances a lot.
I would say really have clear salary expectations. So I'm from New York City, and I will tell you that living in New York and living in Winston-Salem, where I previously lived during grad school, totally different budgets required. So if you are targeting living in a certain place, really know what the cost of living in that city is, have some clear expectations of what you need for your own budget so that you can understand what you're looking for in terms of the salary.
Yeah, I'd say be as open in terms of location as you can. I feel like, and you know, I certainly get family constraints and things like that, but you're probably never going to be more flexible than you are now. So, you know, if you got to be open in where you're looking for a job, now is, you know, things get narrower the more you advance and the more your family evolves, if that's a route you pursue. So I would cast a wide net, especially at a time like this, you know, in terms of location and what sorts of roles you might be willing to pursue, just because you'll have more options. And you might find, you might find a thing you didn't even know, or a place you didn't even know, and it would be great.
Awesome. We can move on to the next question, which is, How can I make sure I am taken seriously as I apply for positions that would be my first full-time year-round job?
It's all about how you show up. I mean, Scott was spot on. Now, I have the flexibility in doing certain things, right? I was making the joke about a sweatshirt. I'm glad you raised that point. I run my own business, right? I have a staff. I'm the leader, so I have the flexibility to show up a certain way. But when I was in that interview stage, or even if I'm having a pitch with the chief people officer of an organization, I show up very differently because I'm trying to land their business. So I think really being cognizant about how you show up and demonstrating that professionalism, being early, even on Zooms, right? I try to plan in my calendar if I am going to have a big pitch meeting or a meeting that I know that I need to be at and presenting, in any case, that I've tested the technology, that I've made sure my Wi-Fi, if I need to take my phone off Wi-Fi so it's not slow, that I've figured all of those pieces out, that I'm there on time and I'm not having someone wait for me. So those, elements of professionalism that matter IRL in real life are the same things that matter as we're in this virtual space.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think it is really in how you show up. And I would say it's better probably to show up in a way that demonstrates that you know that you don't know and you're open to learning, but that you can articulate your skills, that you will bring, rather than it is to show up in a way that implies that you already have it all figured out, because you definitely don't. None of us definitely did. Most people who've been around still don't. And so, just try and relax and understand that people remember everybody's had a first job. So lean into learning and, present that in the way you show up.
I would say particularly if you go the grad school route, to focus on, and everybody has to do a little, soul searching and figure out what you really want to do, specifically in that field, maybe that you're going to grad school for. But if you can figure it out early, try to get an internship in that field. And when you apply to your first real job, emphasize that experience. There's not going to be any learning curve for me. I mentioned that North Carolina has this trial program, and I got some good experience doing that. So when I wrote my first cover letter to Robeson County, I said, and I've done X, Y, and Z before. You don't have to teach me how to do that. And I emphasized that in my interview. Ultimately, I think that's what got me the job, because I had that practical experience. So, if you can get practical experience the free way or the internship way while you're in grad school, that would very much help you for your first full-time job.
Cool. So the next question is, how can I convey the value of my Davidson education to a prospective employer?
So I love this question. I'm a huge fan of liberal arts education. I think it makes you an amazing critical thinker. It makes you very adaptable. You know how to construct an argument. You probably are a pretty good writer. You probably have had to pitch something in some capacity or experimented with ideas and backing up an argument. And those things all make you really competitive in today's environment, especially as things are changing. So for instance, as I mentioned, my first job was at ESPN, and people would always say, you're a political science major. What does that have to do with doing digital business development? But it is an industry that's constantly changing. When I started, cable subscriptions were probably double what they are now, right? Netflix was still doing DVDs when I started, and now they're creating their own content. So you have to be able to move and be willing to be flexible with new information. And I think that's something that's really unique to being a liberal arts graduate. So I would definitely lead in with those things. We call them transferable skills in the industry. Like, what are the things that you can transfer from the type of degree you have now that'll make you really competitive in the career that you're going to go into?
Yeah, 100% to that, I work in higher ed and am super, super passionate about liberal arts being a great way to equip students to become graduates, to become successful employees. And I think that when you talk to employers, they increasingly think that and understand that the ability to communicate is really a lot more important than skills that are very content or field specific, because those things are always changing. But the ability, that content changes, it can quickly become out of date. If you know how to communicate, you are going to be well set up. If you know how to think too, and to problem solve, communicate, you'll be able to adapt as the job environment adapts and as your organization adapts. So I think really leveraging the fact that you can write and that you can speak and that you have critical thinking skills will set you apart. And certainly depending on what sort of space you're applying to, I think the recognition of those things varies, but once you get into the workplace, there's just such a dramatic variation in how well people can do those things. And it's a little disheartening once you leave Davidson and realize that. So, let it shine as early as you can. And because they will really help you move forward more quickly.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Anna and Angelina have said, particularly for writing. I feel like writing is not something everybody knows how to do well. To get my current job, I had to submit a writing sample, and I didn't do a lot of writing in my previous two jobs. So I'm lucky that at least when I was at Davidson, I feel like we had to do a lot of writing for political science. I had to do a research paper for, she's probably not there anymore, but Professor Thornberry. I remember I did a pretty long research paper for her. And I think more so than I think most schools, Davidson really prepares you to be a good writer. And if whatever your field you're seeking involves a writing sample, I think that's your chance to really create some separation and show them what a good candidate you are. Because even in my job now, I work in criminal appeals, so I read appellate briefs all the time, and you would be shocked at how bad writers they are that get submitted to the South Carolina Supreme Court. Like, these people can't write, and so if you have good writing skills, really show them off and use them, and that should separate you.
Great. So the next question is, how can alumni help mitigate new graduate job search stress? If there's an alumni working at an organization I'm interested in, how should I approach asking for help?
I think I would go back to Angelina's strategy from the very, earliest conversation. Be quick, ask for a short period of time after you've connected with them. Open by grabbing their attention, based on the Davidson connection or anything else that you can add to that, and then say, very specifically what you'd like to learn and the time you'd like to take. And I really do think that it's rare that a Davidson grad would say no. I did have one that then later tried to sell me insurance. So don't be that guy. I was so excited about the Davidson alum who wanted to chat, but then ultimately I was too early for life insurance at that time, and so that was not cute. But for the most part, I said yes the first time. So I think we would always be very glad, especially if you're clear on what you want to know.
Yeah, I think you just there's no way a better way to say it than just do it. Just reach out to them, and you can be subtle or you can be blunt. I favor being blunt. Saying, I went to Davidson, help me out. You may not use those words, but just say, I went to Davidson, and I see you did too. I'm interested in learning more about your experience. If you want to be really subtle, you could just sign your name and then put Davidson class of whatever. But I would just say, grab the bull by the horns and say, I went to Davidson, help me out. I mean, I don't think you need to tiptoe around that.
I would also say just don't underestimate what you have to offer that's of value. So when you're reaching out and asking for help, also be willing to come with some ideas about how you can be helpful. The best way that I got a sponsor when I was working in Viacom, so sponsor is a term that's used often in professional development as someone who is a person in a power position that can advocate for you when it comes to throwing your name in the hat to get certain opportunities. And so there was a senior level executive who was an AKA. She had a North Carolina affiliation. I can't remember what school she went to. And when we connected, although she, you know, was a much senior level position, she really wasn't in touch with what was happening in the digital space. So every time we met, I briefed her on what our team was doing in digital business development, other things that I read in the industry trades. And I came to the table with information that was valuable to her that made her want to say, okay, I'll always take meetings with you. And then I was able to get information from her as well. So just thinking like right now, I'm not old at all. I'm young, but there are things I don't know when it comes to technology. Like I don't know how to make a TikTok. I would love to have someone teach me how to do those things. I don't know, you know, Snapchat anymore or anything like that. Or what are the apps that I don't know about that I should be knowing about that offer content creation or engagement with platforms? What do young people think about Facebook? Like these are all questions that I have. So I think, you know, if someone were to ask for time with me, I would want them to put me onto something that I don't know, and, you know, let's have an exchange. I think oftentimes we think that when you are younger or you're just getting started in your career, you don't have anything to offer, but you actually have a lot that you can bring to the table for someone else.
Cool. So with that, that's actually the last question we had prepared for the panel. So we're now going to open it up for anyone who has questions themselves. So we'll start with Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie Turner. I am a senior at Davidson and an econ major. And I'm actually going to grad school next year as well to get my MBA at Notre Dame. So that's just a brief intro about me. But my question is actually for Angelina, and it's specific to your experience with the current economic instability of the world, and in particular, your company's run-in with it. And so I did a quick search on your company, super cool, by the way. And obviously, professional development and leadership is always important, but is arguably more important now than ever. How did COVID affect you as a CEO and your company as a whole in terms of how you guys went about doing things, but also your interaction with other companies that may have been struggling?
First of all, thank you so much, Katie. It really means a lot to me that you are interested in the work that I do, and thank you. I really appreciate it. In terms of leadership during a pandemic, it's been really challenging. I will say, you know, my company, we do work primarily with Black and Latino communities, and those are the communities that have been the most affected, or disproportionately affected, I should say, by the pandemic. So that's caused a lot of challenges. For the contractors that work with me, for instance, many of them have had deaths in their family, and they're still having to show up at work in spite of grieving. And that's been really hard for me because it's a business, right? And I need to meet my goals at the end of the day, but I also am a human and I have empathy for people who are trying their best and showing up while dealing with really tough stuff. So I will say it definitely has pushed me in a lot of ways to grow as a leader. It's an area where I'm constantly just making sure I'm leading with empathy. I'm reading resources all the time about how to show up better. So one of the things that I do, I'm a subscriber to Harvard Business Review. They have great leadership articles. I listen to what industry leaders are doing as they share their challenges. No one has experienced this, right? So even leaders of big companies are going through some of these challenges. So I think I answered the first part of your question. I will just say it's an area where I'm growing and just reminding myself that we are all human and to show up that way. Because it's my company, what ends up happening, and I'm not going to say it's great, but I'll pick up the slack for someone else if I know that they're and that's part of the price of leadership, right? If I know that my client needs something done and a contractor that I was hoping would take care of that can't because of what they're going through, then I kind of own having to pick up the slack. So that is one of the costs of leadership. The second part of your question, how has my business been affected overall, I think was the second part. So I will just say we did a lot in person in 2019, especially. Most of our, actually all of our events were in person. We didn't have any virtual events at all. And when COVID first hit, I had a pretty aggressive year because 2019 was a really good year for the business. And I had some aggressive goals about really tripling our revenue, and I was excited about it. But when COVID hit, things were getting canceled left and right. And we had clients that were saying, we're not sure we want to do, we'll just move it to May. We don't know how long this thing is going to last. But by April, extensions, we're staying at home longer and longer. It became clear that the virtual world was going to be the new normal. So we had to pivot and think about ways we do a lot of engagement. Our whole idea when it comes to learning outcomes is we want to make it an engaging experience for adult learners. And so we had to really be innovative in how do we translate some of the community that we built in person and the engagement we built in person to a virtual setting. What does that look like? How can we be innovative here? And also even changing some of the topics that maybe were less popular. Resilience as a growth mindset, and a growth mindset as a leadership competency. You know, a lot more workshops were needed in that area than maybe in previous years. Also, again, we do a lot of work in diversity. High demand for some of that work in the last year as well. So long-winded answer, but hopefully that helped.
Great, thank you. Yes, that was great, thanks.
I'll get to Clement's question after Kieran. Go ahead, Kieran.
Hi, thank you, all three of you so much. My name is Kieran. I'm also a senior. I am also actually going to graduate school, so I'm going for my master's in Middle Eastern Studies at SOAS, University of London. And Mr. Matthews, this one was mainly for you because you mentioned student loans. I would absolutely love to go on to my master's degree and maybe even beyond and do this further education. But, you know, given the current economic instability, I am a bit worried about taking out loans because it's, you know, it's not likely that the economy is just going to snap back as soon as COVID's done. So I was wondering, like, how did you sort of manage the whole aspect of student loans? Like, how did you decide how much was okay to take out? And then how did you plan towards paying that back?
Loans suck. That's the best way to put it. But they actually haven't been that bad for me because I consolidated all of my loans through my loan servicer. At one time was this company called Great Lakes, I think, and they were one of the organizations the federal government used, but they gave me an option at the end of law school because I had, you know, a piecemeal patchwork of loans, and I basically had them all grouped together, which, you know, has a way too high interest rate attached to it, but it's all just one payment every month. And actually COVID's been very good for that because federal student loans have been suspended now until the end of September. So it's October 1st of 2021 is the next time I should have to pay back loans. But in the meantime, I am hoping, and I'm sure you've heard horror stories about this, I have as well, to utilize the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which was started under George W. Bush. And the objective is you're supposed to, if you work in a public interest field, like myself working for a solicitor's office or a DA's office, and now the Attorney General, you can make 120 consecutive on-time payments, which is 10 years worth of payments, and theoretically get those loans forgiven at the end of 10 years. Now, so it started in 2007. So the people, it first came to fruition, I guess, where people had made 10 years of payments in the first year of the Trump administration. And there's all kinds of bad stories I've read about how difficult people have found it to be when they've tried to apply for loan forgiveness. And somebody's putting on our chat that it's really hard to get into. I think Kelly's shaking her head about that. So fingers crossed, that's my hope. But, you know, it's been manageable because at least my servicer, I now work through Fed Loan Servicing, and they offer a income-based repayment, which, you know, you submit your tax return every year. And my wife and I file separately every year our taxes solely for that reason, because if we filed jointly, then my loan payment would jump up. So I try to keep it manageable, but it's actually a little bit too manageable. Like it's usually about $200 a month, and I'm not making any dent in the interest or the overall balance of the loan. So if you can avoid it, that'd be great, because, you know, it's like taking on, you know, you use a credit card and you swipe it and you're like, oh yeah, you know, that's no pain to me now. And it feels that way when you're in grad school. But I've been lucky. It hasn't been too oppressive for me afterwards. And hopefully, depending on your career, you know, you can maybe find a way to get in a program like that would help you out. Also, I got some assistance from an organization called NC Leaf, which was specifically for legal education, but that they gave me helped me pay off some of my loans. So I hope that answers your question. There's not really a good answer when it comes to loans. Avoid them if you can, but they're there if you need them.
All right, thank you very much.
I know we're up against time, but I'm seeing in the chat and just this personal question for you. I came out of Davidson with a lot of loans, and I worked and did my master's while at a university, so that was subsidized, no cost to me. So fortunately, I didn't take out more loans for that. And when I went and did my PhD, it was funded through a fellowship. And so what I would say, well, now it's a little bit different. You know, I think working before you go on to grad school is a great thing if you're able to do it. Obviously, these days might be a smart choice to go to grad school because of the economy. I totally get that too. I found it a helpful experience, but I would say avoid loans as much as you can. Working in higher ed and around, you know, kind of debt and financial returns of higher ed, which are, returns are enormous, but the debt is also enormous for all students. You have to look at what the earning potential is going to be in the field in which you're going to go study to get a degree. And if you're looking at academia, I would really avoid loans. I just, you know, it is not a lucrative industry. It's a fantastic one. And so I would encourage you, if you are, you know, pursuing scholarly work, to look at how you can get funded opportunities through research assistantships, especially, you know, if you're going to do a master's or PhD that's in an academically oriented discipline. There, you know, certainly loans for law school, med school, you know, things like that, I think are different, but the teaching oriented fields, they don't reward us the same way. I know not all law is created equal too. Public interest law is certainly very different, but
Thank you very much. That's a big help.
Angelina, unless you want to jump in, I was going to get to Clement's question. Okay, cool. So the next question was left by Clement in the chat, and he's essentially asking, what would you guys describe to be the difference between going into grad school right away versus trying to get experience in the work field first?
I'm kind of biased on this question because I went right into grad school, but I would say do it first, because now being in the real world and having a full-time paying job, I think it would be very difficult to all of a sudden say, you know what, I'm going to give this salary up and live on student loans. Like that would be a very hard Band-Aid to pull off for me. So, I didn't do it that way. I went directly in. So I think that's the best idea. So I can't really give a perspective on doing it the other way, but there could always be the chance that you just, never find that time, and it gets to be, several years later. I actually went to law school with somebody like that who came to law school when he was 40, and he told me just like, yeah, I was going to do it, and kept putting it off. And it just, all of a sudden he was 40 before he got around to doing it. So I think it would be much easier if you just went right into whatever grad school you're going to go to and then search for a job after that.
I also went straight through, and I will say one of the challenges though is for me, because I went to a B school program, was I wanted a much higher salary. And in my field, in certain industries, your master's degree may not matter as much when it comes to salary. So it was a little disappointing to move into media where it wasn't hugely valued. And all my friends that were in industries where it was really valued were getting crazy paychecks. And mine, was the same as someone coming right out of college. That's one thought. But I also just say, and this is just like the career coach in me, any path you take is the path that you're meant to take. So, I just we all are meant to have our own path. And if that for you is going to grad school at 40. So for instance, some days I regret, I really want a PhD. And some days I regret not doing that when I was a lot younger. But if I want it, I'm going to do it, when the time is right for me. So I think you have to just have that inner peace, and that the path that you're supposed to be on is the path that you will be on.
Those are
I just have a quick question for any of the panelists. Are there any phrases or words that you'd recommend omitting from a cover letter when applying for a job that might seem redundant or kind of cliche, but not very specific? Like, are there any words or phrases that you'd recommend just avoiding entirely?
I wouldn't say anything like very interested or, extremely interested. To me, I read those words all the time in a legal context, and they say this was extremely prejudicial. Just say it was prejudicial, or just say I'm interested. I don't think you need to add the modifying adjective to say, I'm extremely interested, or, I don't know. To me, it doesn't add anything. I like plain, direct, simple, to the point language. That's a personal preference for me. Angelina might have a better take on this being in the career field, but I would avoid words like that.
I agree. I also say it sounds silly, but common errors that I see are people updating their cover letter and not changing the name of the company or the person that it's directed to from a previous cover letter. That happens so often, and it can be a really big turnoff to a potential employer. So really being, factoring in that extra time to maybe have someone proofread it so that you're really sure. I've even had to do that sometimes with my staff on proposals where I'm like, wait, you have the old client's name there. You need to update that. So making sure that they really are tailored. And then also that spelling and grammar piece is really, really important as well, just for how you show up in terms of your professionalism.
Thank you so much to everyone.
Well, Malcolm is the only hand I see, so I'm going to pass it down.
Yeah, I'm Malcolm. I actually graduated class of 2020, so I guess I've been out for a year kind of. I'm planning to go into a master's program for mechanical engineering this fall. I did physics at Davidson. Kind of took, I guess, a gap semester for the first semester after, and then now I'm taking post-bac classes to prepare for the master's program, I guess. My question is for, I guess, anyone who can answer it. What is or I guess, how much value would you place in the name brand of a master's program that you go into, especially with regard to to loans, which we've been talking about. What's the balance you would look for in terms of like how expensive of a school you go into versus how, I guess, prestigious or well known that school is? Because like obviously, for instance, an Ivy school is not going to give much in terms of scholarship or aid versus a smaller school, but obviously that Ivy name can get you into certain companies or certain jobs that maybe another school can't. So I guess what would you say is more important and what would you go for?
So that's a super good question. And I think it depends on what you want to do with the master's. If you want to be in academia, we, unfortunately, I have to self-identify with them, are really into names of institutions and a little elitist. And so there's definitely, you want to go to the very best program that you can go to if you want to be a faculty member, because they're going to look at that. But if you are looking to practice in a more applied field, it may not, there are so many really good, solid institutions, and it just may not be worth the cost differential to, or the selectivity or whatever the situation is, to really pursue the, top tier. And I would also say though, while the elite, you might feel like you'd have more financial resources or support at a kind of mid-tier institution. I think there probably are more fellowship and research assistantship options available at the elites because they're better resourced. And so, don't second guess that. I would still, I'm not sure, what you want to do after and what sorts of funding options you might be looking at in the program. But like a Georgia Tech or like a big kind of researchy institution is going to have more opportunities that would pay you to do work and research while you're there, than a more teaching oriented institution. You might not have faculty that's doing as much applied research that you could jump in on and get paid for.
I would
So
say
it depends. Not a great answer.
Well, I'm also going to say it depends, Anna. At least I can only speak in the legal field. If you did want to go into legal academia, it would be important, or get a clerkship with the Supreme Court, then it's important if you go to Harvard or Yale. But if you, like, for instance, in South Carolina, there's only 2 law schools in South Carolina. And if you want to live and practice there, then there's nothing wrong with going to USC. I would say the same thing for, UNC and North Carolina or another state school. But generally speaking, I mean, there's plenty of people in my graduating class that got the big city firm job, in Charlotte, just fine. It didn't matter that they went to USC, and, USC is I'll admit, more of a middle tier law school. And I don't think it would really benefit you to go to someplace like Duke or Vanderbilt or Harvard unless, you were really trying to get that U.S. Supreme Court clerkship or, New York City firm job, or like Anna said, academia is very important. All the professors at USC went to Harvard or Yale or somewhere. So to get in academia is important, but I don't know in your context what, you're aiming for. So it depends.
Yeah, so it depends. I would say that as well. I totally, for a lot of reasons relate to that question, just because I didn't have a really corporate network and I knew I was going into business, and I had concerns myself. Is Davidson well known enough for the industries I'm in, or Wake Forest? Are people going to know it? I was really lucky because the time when I was graduating from school, we had a basketball player who kind of put the name on the map. So moving into companies or trying to get roles at companies like ESPN, it was a good conversation starter. People who had never heard of Davidson suddenly knew it. So anyway, I would say my best advice to you would be to ask a couple of folks who did both. Look at, where they are in their careers and their lives and their happiness, and ask some compelling, or I guess critical questions around what they think leads them to the success that they're having and their happiness. Is it the degree? Is it something else? Is it their network? Is it a skill they picked up? Is it something that they're bringing to the table that's unique? Because yeah, there's just, again, there's folks who I know who have done the traditional MBA path, for instance, at elite universities, and then they're in roles where they have burnout and they're not even happy. So I say it depends, because you have to think about, again, what's your vision for your life and how do you define success?
Awesome. So that's pretty much all the questions I've seen either put in the chat or anybody raising their hand. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Kelly, who wants to make a few announcements and close it out.
Okay. Thank you, Nabil, and thank you for taking the time to join us tonight to help moderate. And thank you to all of our panelists. You know, I know that you can hear me because I was on mute, but I just was sitting here saying to a lot of what you guys were saying, like, yep, oh my gosh, yes, because a lot of the information that they're passing along, it's just been really helpful. Just three, quick announcements that I was kind of thinking of whenever some topics that we were talking about here tonight. One with respect when we talked about Zoom interviewing, I wanted to make sure that students knew that, for the rest of the semester, if you have, any type of interview coming up for a job, for an internship, for a fellowship, for graduate school, if you're just needing some private space to have some, a career conversation, and you're looking for, kind of a quiet, appropriate place to do that, the CCD is allowing students to reserve the conference room to do that. So if you want the opportunity to do that, just go ahead and email our main address at careers@davidson.edu to request the day and the time that you would like to do that. Kayla, can you remind me how far in advance we need to hear that? Is it a day or two?
Yeah, 24 hours is preferable.
Okay, because we need to get in touch with the people in the union to make sure that the space can be unlocked. So know that that's an opportunity that's available. Second announcement is with regard to, when I think it was Scott that was really talking about the opportunity to take an unpaid position, to take an internship that can serve as a springboard to something that you can be doing. Wanted to let people know that every year the Center for Career Development offers our summer internship grant program. And that is for students who are pursuing unpaid or low paying summer internships. And low paying would be anything that's equal to or less than $3,000 for that summer experience. There are grant opportunities to help you offset cost of living expenses that you might be experiencing. For this coming summer, the current seniors, the class of 2021, are being included in that. And so if you are looking for an opportunity to pursue in the summer and you are thinking that this opportunity would be great for you professionally, but financially it might be a stretch, I strongly encourage you to look up information about the summer internship grant program. You can find information about it in Handshake if you go to the resources section and look up summer internship grants. Okay. And then finally, in closing, and I'm remiss in doing this, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce people who are on the call to one of Kayla's and I newest teammates to the CCD. Liz Wilson has joined us effectively a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. All the days are going into each other at this point. Liz is going to be working with us as a career advisor in the capacity working specifically with students of the class of 2021, as well as students of the class of 2020. So we're recognizing that your job and career development needs are completely unique, like nobody has experienced before. And we want to make sure that you know that you have resources that are available to you. So Liz is joining us in the capacity to meet with students and do some programming. So look for information from us in the next couple of weeks. Liz and Kayla are doing some, putting their brains together to come up with some really great programming ideas for graduating students. So look for information for that coming up, okay? Okay, well, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. I know that we are all tired. I hope that everybody is staying healthy and staying positive as best you can. Please reach out if you've got any questions, and thanks again to our panelists. And I'll conclude there and hope that everybody has